So our next storyteller, I think we're about 10 minutes ahead of schedule, and that's okay. But I know our next speaker through her day job as the very capable and beloved CAO for the township of Sioux Narrows, Nestor Falls. But today you won't be meeting that person. You're going to be meeting the other Wanda. You're going to meet local landscape photographer and astrophotographer Wanda Kabel. Today's Wanda, the one that you're going to meet, will share images that capture the land, lake, flora, fauna, history, and culture unique to the Lake of the Woods area. So let's give a big common ground welcome to creative artist with a very good eye, Wanda Kabel.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone.
And I'm up here. I'm just going to be asking Wanda questions. I was introduced to Wanda's work at the Sioux Narrows Art Show. I remember, if you've ever been there in September, I think it was, coming around the corner and just seeing these photos. And I kind of hounded her for 2 years to please come and present her story and her photos. So we decided to take the conversational approach. And so we will start with, when did you become interested in photography?
Thank you for the really warm welcome and introduction. It's interesting to be asked that question because I can't honestly remember when that I became interested. It has been so long since I've been taking photographs, but my first exposure would be through my mom, who's here today, Lou. In our childhood, she had a really amazing, I still remember what it looks like today, Nikon 35 millimeter camera and video camera. So in our childhood, my mom was always taking photos of us, photos of events, birthday parties. So I think that's where my interest began, because I was always surrounded by and through photography. I didn't realize how early that I had started until this past summer. We had some pretty extreme flash flooding in our region, and our home was affected, and I was going through things, cleaning up the basement, and I had found some old photographs that I forget actually having taken myself, but it did give me a bit of a time stamp of sorts. And that would have been around grade 5. So around 10 years old is when I first started taking photos myself. And then I also remember in grade 8 at Lakewood School, my homeroom teacher and English teacher actually introduced our classroom as a, I'm not even really quite sure how he integrated it into it. I think he had an interest in photography and somehow introduced it through his classroom. But he taught us how to use how to take photos using manual settings, and as well how to develop black and white photography. And that was Mr. Fred Gray was his name. He was one of my favorite teachers. We definitely had a kindred interest in photography.
Do you have some pictures of your
yes, some
cameras?
Yeah, I do have some. Oh, there we go. I'll skip back. I skipped forward a little bit. This is an image of one of my setups showing some of the equipment that I use to shoot night photography. And this is just a few more pictures of the one where you can see frost on the lens. I had gone out, I think it was New Year's Eve, to take photos because there was a particularly vibrant display of northern lights, and it also happened to be minus 32, I think, that night. So when I brought my equipment in, not only was I really cold, but so was my gear, and you could see evidence of that on the lens. And then just another image of my equipment getting set up to shoot at night. And I think that's all I have for equipment.
I understand your family has roots in northwestern Ontario going back 1800s and earlier. Is that better? Okay. I understand your family has roots in northwestern Ontario. Could you tell us about your family?
Sure.
And pictures, too.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. My family has roots in Lake of the Woods and the northwestern Ontario region going back to the late 1800s and time immemorial. My immediate family has called Sioux Narrows home for approximately 60 years. My mom, Lou, who I've already pointed out, who's here today, and my sister, Wendy, is accompanying us. My mom, Lou, is a member of Rainy River First Nation. Her grandmother on her father's side, her name was Mary Jane McLeod. She was from Northwest Angle 37 and transferred to Rainy River First Nation in the late 1800s. She married George Sinclair, whose family is from the Orkney Islands of Scotland. He was a Hudson Bay Company laborer and interpreter, and among their many children was Joseph Sinclair, my mom's dad, my grandfather. My mom's grandparents on her mother's side, Edith Causer and Hector Gaughan, moved to Kenora in the late 1900s. And among their many children was Marguerite, or Peggy, who grew up in Kenora in the 1930s and 40s. And the photograph that's to your left, the woman on the right is my grandmother, Peggy, with one of her friends at a winter carnival event. And you can see the Ken Risha Hotel very slightly to the right of that photograph. And then there's another photo of my grandmother on the right with her mom and another family member, and they're standing beside a large boat on the lake. It was called the Howard Ott, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was moored somewhere at Sioux Narrows at that time. Some of my grandma's siblings, great aunts and uncles and cousins, have spent their entire lives in Kenora, and my auntie Betty Albert still lives in Kenora today. My mom's parents, my grandparents, Peggy and Joe, lived in Thunder Bay, Fort Frances, and then moved to Sioux Narrows in the early 1970s. My parents, Ron and Lou, met in Fort Frances in the early 70s, and they moved to Sioux Narrows at that time, where they had 4 children, including me.
What kind of animal is that?
That is a beaver. That was my grandma and would have been her sister-in-law, and that would have been in, I believe, the 50s, the 1950s, and that was on the trap line. And then the picture to the left is my grandfather, Joseph, who served in World War II. Here's a few photos of myself and my 3 younger sisters, and then my grandma Peggy and myself fishing when I was a little girl. My dad to the left and my mom to the right. Just early photos of us fishing and having a shore lunch, a favorite pastime of ours today, and many others.
And where did you grow up in Sioux Narrows?
My parents, when they moved to Sioux Narrows in the 70s, worked for Herb Hoffman, and he owned 2 resorts at Sioux Narrows, Shingwalk and Red Indian Lodge. And they spent, my parents worked at and then later ran the resort, Red Indian Lodge, up until about 5 years ago when the boat, neither camp to this day operate publicly. They're both privatized now.
And you have your own family now, a little.
Yes. I'm not sure. Oh, there's a picture of me. It's kind of hard to make out because it's a vast landscape photo, but that's a picture of myself and my young son, Chase, watching the Northern Lights last summer from our dock. My husband and I and our son, we live in Sioux Narrows to this day. My husband is also a longtime Northwestern Ontario resident, and we now call Sioux Narrows our home.
So how does your ancestors and the family knowledge influence your photography of today?
Having the privilege of growing up on Lake of the Woods in this region, not to mention having a family with Indigenous roots. My childhood was always enriched with land and lake-based activities and traditions. When I was growing up, we spent a lot of time participating in lake and land-based activities, exploring, traveling. Another picture of my son when we were out ice fishing, actually. That's what we were doing that day. So our family has always been very active, and we always enjoyed doing wilderness activities and traveling. So even, I remember going camping throughout the years, going on houseboat trips throughout the years, doing a lot of hiking and exploring, even just day trips. That's myself, my husband, and my son hiking. That's a photo of my son when we were out looking for morel mushrooms and harvesting a small quantity for supper that night. Just on little hikes, and we found some giant puffball mushrooms. And, of course, fishing. We still spend a lot of time with my parents out exploring and fishing and traveling, adventuring. This next part ties into during COVID, we had a fairly small social bubble, of course. So myself, my family, and my parents did a lot of exploring on Lake of the Woods. And we set out, we knew of many culturally significant sites near and around us where I grew up. But we had set out just because we were always looking for something to do as a small group, and there wasn't a lot of social activities or anywhere to go, so we took that opportunity to do some more exploring in our backyards, and we set out looking for pictographs, and a few other culturally significant sites. This site here happens to be a thunderbird nest on Lake of the Woods. It's just a really beautiful and it's a very meaningful site. So
What's a thunderbird nest?
Thunderbird nest. I'm not an expert, and I don't have any family stories to tell with respect to it, but it's culturally significant to the Anishinaabe. Mm-hmm. It is a known site to the Anishinaabe peoples in the area surrounding where this is located. This here is a petroglyph site on Lake of the Woods. It's a very common location to leave offerings. And here are some of the photos of some of the other sites that we visited, either revisited, having known about the sites, and some sites that we didn't know about. We were led to by an old University of Toronto press publication that I had come across years ago, and in reading it, it had a small section on sites at Lake of the Woods that were visited by a scholar in the 60s. And it actually, through his descriptions, led us to find some sites that we didn't know existed, even though that they were in the area where I grew up. And in reading that, I was also really surprised to see the name of a great uncle who, in fact, guided the scholar, and he took him to some known sites, and then they found some sites together. This is another area that's really close to Sioux Narrows. And here's just some nature shots. Another endeavor, personal endeavor, photographically speaking, is searching for unique flora in our region. This is many people may already know what it is, but it's a ram's head orchid, and it's a very tiny, tiny orchid, so it is difficult to, even if you come across it, it can be difficult to spot because the flower itself is only about 10 centimeters tall, or the plant itself is about 10 centimeters tall, and the little flower is only 1.5 to 2 centimeters, so it can be easy to overlook.
When does it bloom?
They all seem. It seems like, at least when I go looking, June is usually when you'll see not only this particular orchid, but some of the other, like the pink moccasin flower, the other lady slippers in the area. This is another interesting flower, ghost flower. It goes. There are another several names that it can be referred to as. It's often mistaken for a fungus, but it actually is indeed a flower. It just lacks the green chlorophyll of typical flowers, and in fact can grow in very dark places because it doesn't rely on chlorophyll to live. It actually is parasitic, so while it's not a fungi, it is a flower, but it can act like it is a parasite, so it doesn't rely on the sun to live. And a monarch. I think with the popularity, many people do raise and release monarchs. We seem to be seeing a lot more of them around. So, and a healthy little grove of yellow lady slippers. and another image of a pink moccasin flower or pink lady slipper. And this is a coral striped orchid, another tiny little orchid that I've been lucky enough to see and photograph. One species that continues to evade me is the pitcher plant. It's something that I have been in pursuit of and that I am told does exist in these parts. So if anyone here today knows of the location of a pitcher plant, I'd love to hear from you. Only to photograph it, not to disturb it or do any damages, but just to photograph it.
So how hard is it to come upon a deer and get that photo? Like, do you have? I guess you must have a zoom lens or something, or?
I do. I don't have a high. It's not my wildlife photography. While it does interest me, I don't have the big. High-powered zoom lenses, but as anybody who knows and lives in this area, deer are quite prolific, so they aren't always necessarily difficult to capture. So yeah.
And where is this located?
This is in the Lake of the Woods region, but it's right across the border in Minnesota, not very far from War Road. And in fact, I haven't visited it for a few years, but I like to take images that show a progression of stages throughout the various phases of dilapidation, I guess you could say, and some older buildings. I really always loved. Anytime I passed that area, I just loved that sign, knives and wild rice. It just seems very befitting of of the area. So just some more interesting surprise finds. That outhouse is actually off of one of the snowplow turnarounds, and I'm not sure how long it's been there, but it's definitely been there for a long time. And then to the right is an old stove that's actually at one of the old POW camp locations at Red Cliff Bay on Lake of the Woods.
Oh my.
You can still see some evidence of footings from the old buildings, but there's not a lot visible there today, but there are a few old metal things that are rusting away, and nature is taking back. This is a scan of a film photo that I had taken about 25 years ago of the mine building at the Regina Bay Mining Company location that is on Regina Bay right at Sioux Narrows. It was, I'm not a historian, but just through common knowledge, it was an operation in the late 1800s in the Sioux Narrows area. And just as a point of interest, like I said, I like to revisit some of the locations and just see how things have changed over the years. And I think the next image is, this was taken that's what's left, or what it looks like today. The trees have really grown up and are really taking it back, and the building is starting to really fall in on itself.
So, what is astrophotography?
Astrophotography really can mean a number of things, but very generally speaking, it is photographing astronomical objects at night. So taking photos at night, and this is one of my favorite images over since I've started getting really focused on astrophotography, I do like to incorporate recognizable, landmarks or images along with the night sky. And as luck would have it, not only are the stars visible in this image, but also the aurora borealis reflecting on the water. We are extremely fortunate in northwestern Ontario to live in fairly unaffected by light pollution skies. So we are able to see better than folks who live in more urban locations. Many phenomena that occur in the night sky, not only astronomical objects themselves, but events such as the aurora borealis. This image is showcasing two phenomena. This is a star trail image, but it is also showing fireflies. So the light left. This is a assembly of many images into one to show the activity or the really strong or high activity of
Is this time lapse?
It's not time lapse because it's a still image, but it's a layered image. So there are, I believe, probably that night, there's probably 500 photos that are layered together, so you see all of the activity. You get to see the star trails as well as all of the little firefly lights.
That's beautiful.
This is another phenomenon that is related to both artificial light as well as very particular atmospheric conditions. The light pillars that you see are actually street lights and lights from homes, car lights that are reflecting off of tiny ice crystals in the atmosphere. It doesn't happen all of the time, but when it does, it's really particularly striking and beautiful. So this was probably 2 years ago, around Christmas time, and that's the community of. It's mostly, those lights are mostly above the community of Northwest Angle 37.
Is that what it actually looked like, or is that again?
That is very much what it looked like, but of course through long exposures, the camera sensor does let in more light than the human eye can see, so things can appear more vibrant than when we're looking at them. But when you do see them in person, they are very dramatic. So. This is more of a specialized image. It's not landscape. This is a deeper space object. That's the Andromeda galaxy, and it was not shot with a zoom lens per se, but definitely a smaller focal range than the typical wide-angle zoom, and the detail is afforded by the use of what's called a tracker. In the first photo that you saw, my camera was actually attached to above the tripod, attached to a white and green piece of equipment. That piece of equipment is it's called an equatorial mount, and when you attach your camera to it, the equatorial mount moves at the same speed as the Earth, because the Earth is always moving. And if you're taking a long exposure photo, if you don't have that additional assistance with you, things will blur or trail. The tracker allows the camera to take a sharper, clearer image of deeper sky objects. This is a picture of my sister Wendy and I out on the ice roads in our region. I actually used a headlamp I pointed it down at the ice because it was so clear. I wanted to see if I could get some of the detail in the ice in the photograph. So that's why it looks blue and white. And then the Orion constellation is showcased in that photo.
And at what time in the evening would this be?
That would have been in winter time, so I don't think we were out too late, but in winters here, the nights start early, so it probably would have been 10 o'clock at night. This is another fun image. It's actually a composition of 2 photos. One was taken so I could show the clarity and the sharpness of the water and the land in the foreground, and then I made an adjustment to my lens to zoom the photo so it gives it a bit of a starburst effect, and that is the star formation called Rho Ophiuchi, and it occurs right near the end of the brightest part of the Milky Way. So the really bright area here would be if it wasn't zoomed to give it the starburst effect, you'd be able to see the bright part of the Milky Way and Rho Ophiuchi. It's not visible in the wintertime. It's only visible in the spring and summer, at least high enough above the horizon where you can get a good picture of it. This is my son and I, showcasing 2 things: our moccasins and our viewscape of strong Northern Lights display. This is another image taken at Lake of the Woods that shows, it's a star spiral, and it's actually an effect where the center is the star Polaris, which is a focal point in the sky that is always static. So if you take the star spiral effect is actually produced by software, but it's about 1,000 images taken over from dusk until dawn. The foreground is one still image, and the background is that composite showing the star spiral around Polaris.
And is that actually a wolf?
It is a wolf, yes. Yeah.
And I understand you do time-lapse video?
Yes.
And, we have some...
I think it's...
coming up?
Yeah, I think Wayne is going to help us out with that.
Yeah.
The time-lapse, while it appears to be a video, it actually is 1,000, sometimes thousands of images that are taken in very close proximity, within seconds of each other. So, and I use a piece of software that actually, assembles them all together into one video image. So most of my time-lapse images, when I set up for them, I start them shooting at sun down, and I shoot an image every few seconds until sun up. So typically, this probably is 1,500 still images that are stitched together to make the video. And it was a particularly strong Northern Lights event.
That's a long night.
Well, I'm not always, this is out my front door. I'm very lucky to live where I can go set up on shore. So I'm not always out all night with my camera, but yes, I do spend a lot of time outside by myself in the dark. This is another strong event. This was taken last summer during the peak high water, so you can see my neighbor's dock is weighted down with multiple barrels. And there are times when I will set up with the intent of capturing the Milky Way or images to assemble into a star spiral or other image, and the Northern Lights will just surprise. Even though I do watch forecasting for them, there are times when they show up and unexpectedly. This image is from approximately 2 weeks ago. We had the strongest auroral event since 2017, and I know many people were fortunate enough to get out and see them. The lights could be seen quite extensively throughout North America, and we were lucky enough that the skies were clear, and I was able to capture them that night. So,
well, and I see that you're online. What has been the response to your photos online?
I've been extremely grateful and lucky to have met some amazing other photographers, people just interested generally in photography. I connected in the last few years with a NASA scientist, Dr. Elizabeth McDonald. She has used some of my work in some of her presentations that she has made. Through those connections, meeting her, I've had the opportunity to ask questions about some of the things that I've captured, and I was really excited. Probably 5 years ago, I had set up with the intent of taking photos of the Milky Way, and I captured what I called at the time an auroral cloud, and it looked like the same color green as you would typically see in the Northern Lights, but it was an oval-shaped. It was an oval shape, and it was moving in the wrong direction. It was moving from, typically, you see the Northern Lights in the northern sky. This object was moving from the south to the north, and I always thought it was odd. I took, I had a bunch of still photos of it, so I was able to assemble it into a time-lapse video, and I never knew what it was. And when I finally connected with Dr. Liz, I actually reached out and I said, "Can you shed some light? Like, what is this?" And she was excited too, because it's something fairly new. It was known, so of course I didn't discover it, though I was quite proud to have captured it on camera. But and of course I was calling it an auroral cloud. It has a much more scientific name. The blob is what they call it. And science has yet to determine what exactly it is. If you are interested in seeing it, I'll give a shameless plug, and you can check out my Instagram at Wanda K. I do have a still image of that, and I do have video of that phenomenon there. So, and then of course I've been very lucky to see a number of folks at events such as the Arts Festival. I do some work that I sell, so I have had customers approach me in the past, and during COVID, when a lot of our seasonal residents in the area who were from the United States couldn't come up, I have been told that people like to follow my account because it gave them an opportunity to see their home away from home when they weren't able to be here. So it's just really nice connecting with people and finding out that the work that you put out there, people enjoy or have, meaningful connections to.
Well, and you have a full-time job and a family, a young family.
Yes.
Do you ever see yourself tiring of photography or not having time for it or anything like that?
I don't. I find that my drive to photograph only increases with time. In a way, my evolving compositional strategy is informed by a marked desire to explore how the visual properties of my images might be made relevant to document the changes in my life, the environment, and the time in which we live. My body of work thus far, upon reflection, is really a distillation of my family, the chaos of a busy life, the community, the landscapes, and the environment that surrounds us. And it largely focuses on the lakes, forest, sky, and the people of the Lake of the Woods region. This helps bring me clarity and to remember moments, events, places, and people. And I can't imagine myself ever tiring of that.
No. And we are ever so grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing your
you so
view
much.
of the Lake of the Woods area.